to In Conversation with Jess and with myself as we just kind of share some thoughts and think through some things. Today, England goes back and has gone back, in fact, into lockdown, to the most restrictive restrictions. We're not meant to be leaving our homes. Church has been closed for what I'm now calling gathered worship, because public worship is still happening. So I'm saying there'll be no gathered worship, and we're told it's till December. Last week and the week before we had a little bit of a conversation about that. This week we want to share something that might help you with all these lockdown restrictions that certainly are in place for the next 4 weeks and whatever lies beyond that, because we all need coping mechanisms, and the coping mechanisms we had in the spring lockdown might not work so well in this lockdown, mainly because we're not going to have that beautiful weather. Let's face it, we're already getting the short, dark evenings, although I've been thankful to get up to the sun for our 8 o'clock service rather than sheer darkness. And so actually it might be a time for us to say, how are we going to cope with this lockdown differently, because it's going to be very different. And we stumbled across a resource that the Bishop of Oxford, Right Reverend Stephen Croft, who used to be Bishop of Sheffield, released to his diocese down in Oxford at the beginning of October. And it's he'd been doing some thinking around the rule of 6, and so he created his own guide to the rule of 6, his own interpretation of the rule of 6, and it was quite helpful. So we just kind of wanted to introduce it to you today and to offer it as a coping mechanism for lockdowns and for the restrictions, in the hope that you might find it helpful. And if you don't find all 6 things helpful, that you might find some of it helpful.
Yeah, definitely. I think when we stumbled across it, he said he'd been doing some thinking around the rule of 6, which at that time was still fairly new. It's amazing how quickly things have changed and moved on, and how actually that rule of 6 has something to say to us as followers of Jesus. And so this resource is largely about how can we kind of keep up, if you like, how can we continue in our Christian faith, in our discipleship, during these lockdown restrictions when we particularly can't gather together. Yeah.
So we've heard a lot about timeframes, and if we think about it, it was around this time last year we first heard of coronavirus out in China, and we all looked upon the news out there and were deeply saddened by what we were hearing. But none of us thought it would reach the UK, and it was about February time that it reached the UK in small numbers. And then towards the end of March, we went into our first lockdown. So we've already been dealing with this in the country for a substantial period of time, and the world has been dealing with it for a much longer period of time. Over the summer, we kind of experienced some sort of normality again. We were able to socialise with people, and then they kind of, in Boris Johnson's words, put the brakes on since then. Again, we're going to lockdown today for 4 weeks, we're told. But the Bishop of Oxford is encouraging people as the kind of the first of the 6. I don't get the 6. I don't know.
6 rules of 6.
6 rules of 6. That's what we'll call it. His first one is to encourage us to be thinking actually not about 1 month, but about 6 months. Now that might find really hard. That might be really discouraging and not very helpful, you might say. But actually 6 months time from the start of October is Easter, and we're already 1 month into that. So when we're saying 6 months, actually we're saying 5 months.
Yeah.
In 5 months time we will be celebrating the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and so actually we've got 5 months of doing life differently, in the hope that in 5 months time, 6 months from back in October, actually there might be a vaccine about. Some of the restrictions might have been relaxed, and you never know, we might be able to celebrate Easter together as a church family, and do all the things that we did not this year but last year.
Yeah, and I think as much as saying 6 months feels like an awful lot of time, and perhaps feels a little bit pessimistic, actually I think it's quite helpful, because I remember back when the first lockdown started, they talked about, this will just be around for 3 months. And then 3 months has turned into, where we are now, is it 6 months on from that. And we were reflecting only today that, Samuel was still a baby, really, when we went into the first lockdown. And he is definitely a little boy now.
When lockdown started, this was the picture we took. And yesterday, I took this picture to mark the start of the second lockdown. What a change there has been in him, and we've noticed that, and that just kind of tells us the time difference, really.
Yeah, and so I just think actually in some respects it's easier to have a longer time frame to work toward, because we won't get downhearted if that 4 weeks gets extended, but also actually, as Calum was saying, it helps us to travel, if you like, with the church's year. It helps us to go along with the seasons that the church usually marks, although somewhat differently, in the hope that we might be able to have a massive, joyful celebration of Jesus' death and resurrection at Easter. And so Stephen Croft talks about how in this season that we're in of restrictions and of lockdown, we should lean into the church's year. So what he means by that is that we should kind of allow the church's year to carry us through this next however long it's going to be.
So we've got Christ the King celebrating the sovereignty of Jesus coming up in the next couple of weeks. We've got Advent, we've got Christmas, the 12 days of Christmas. We've got Epiphany, where we remember the journey of the wise men from the East coming to pay their respects to Jesus. We've got a couple of days of ordinary time where we pretend nothing is particularly special. And then we'll move into Lent, where we will be preparing for Easter and remembering Jesus' temptations in the wilderness. We may have an agricultural festival in part of that. I'm not sure whether we do or not. But we may have something like Plough Sunday around then. I can't remember when that is. And of course we've got Mothering Sunday as well.
And I think if I just go back to the first lockdown again, we were right at the end of Lent and going into Easter back then. And actually there was lots of stuff around that time that we would normally do that helped us get through it. So I distinctly remember kind of focusing on the suffering of Jesus and thinking about the suffering of people across our nation and across our world, and thinking about the fact that we were now having to worship in our homes because we weren't allowed to meet in church, and almost kind of correlating that with the disciples first meeting in the upper room ahead of Jesus' crucifixion, and then meeting in secret after he died, for fear that they too would die. And so I think we offer that to you as something that may well happen again in these seasons that we find ourselves in, that there may be stories that chime in with us, which just reveal really that scripture is as relevant today as it was over 2,000 years ago.
So number one, we just want to encourage you to extend your horizon beyond the beginning of December, and maybe look more to April, because there might actually be a little bit more hope in April than there might be in December. I'm not saying the scientists can't do it, but let's work with our mental health and think long term rather than short term. That's the first one. We'll try and get through the next 5 slightly quicker. The second one is to do with days of the week. We went to IKEA at the beginning of the week. If you follow me on Facebook or Instagram, you'll have seen that I now know what 1,000 candles look like. I went and bought 1,000 candles from IKEA. Don't worry, I'm not panic buying. There was a purpose to that, and you'll discover that closer to Christmas. But actually, we were stood in the lift going back to the car, and the lady that was in the lift with us, she went, "I have no idea what day of the week it was." And I went to answer her, and I suddenly went, "Actually, hang on a minute, I'm not sure what day of the week it is." And so our second encouragement to you is actually find a day to just rest. Find a day to do something that is completely different from the other 6 days of the week. We're told at the beginning of Genesis that God created the world in 6 days, in 6 periods of time, and on the 7th day he rested. There's that famous hymn by the hymn writer who I can't stand, George Herbert, who says, 1 in 7, not 7 in 1 or something like that.
I think you've just ruined that even more.
Well, there we go. That's my homage to George Herbert.
Yeah, but I guess the idea behind it actually is that the days might feel very
6
samey.
in 1, not 1 in 7. Sure,
no, you
that's
still
it.
didn't get that right. But actually the days feel quite samey at the moment, and I know we have found it hard to take a day off because actually, as we've said before, we normally like to go out and do things on our day off, and obviously that is restricted now to some degree, and so it might feel like that's actually quite a hard thing to do. But even if that is literally just kind of sitting and watching TV all day, that that is absolutely fine. Something
You'll
you're
find
not
that
very
really
good at.
easy.
Not with Samuel around. But just find something that allows you to almost lift yourself a little bit from the kind of mundane everyday stuff that is kind of getting us down, really. That's the second thing we want to offer to you.
Do you want to do number 3?
Yeah, so number 3 is thinking about the fact that, as Calum said, we're not able to gather in person at the moment, particularly in church. Which is really hard for all of us, and so we're encouraged to think about the church a bit like it was in the early days of the church beginning. Think of the church as a small group, and so the third encouragement is to find 6 people to journey this next season with. So if you are in a home group or a book group or something like that, you might already have something like that in place. Or even just think about those people you used to kind of socialise with over coffee after church, or people who you would naturally spend time with. Who are those 6 people who you could journey with over this next season? And we're encouraged to keep in contact with them, so to phone them, to Zoom them, to FaceTime them, whatever medium you have possible. There are others. And also to pray with them and for them, and to really just share your life with them in a way that you're able to, given the restrictions.
Yeah.
So to just be completely honest with them about how you're doing, and for them in turn to be honest with you, and to really just support each other and be there for one another, even though you can't be physically.
Yeah, so a word that some people probably don't like, but I think is probably a really helpful word in discipleship and Christian life is accountability. And so I'd really encourage you, find 6 people you can be accountable to. And that's accountable about, have you had a day where you just do nothing? Have you had a day where you've rested? Are you spending enough time with your family? Are you praying? I have a spiritual director. I don't know if she watches this or not, and she's a great priest and a bit of a friend, and I do love going and just kind of spending time talking life over with her. But whenever I've got a meeting coming up with her, I start praying more because I know she's going to ask me about my prayer life, and that's her job, to hold me accountable to the vows that I've made before God at my ordination. Now obviously you might not want to take it as serious as that and make vows, but having a group of people you can be honest with, you can share life's ups and downs, and someone you can be accountable to is really important, and actually someone you can share a drink with. I'm not going to ban drinking from your group of 6. So something I've talked about to some people at St Michael's in Bramall a little bit is setting up connect groups, which would essentially be like this: groups of 6 or 7 people that would meet together to pray, to share life, to have a laugh, to do things together, to read the Bible a little bit, and just share those deep questions of faith with one another. Obviously, we can't do that in person, but we can do it digitally. We have been meeting with the youth group in person. We're probably going to go back to Zoom with them. And there's probably about 6, 7, 8 of us. And actually, it's always a really refreshing time. I go into it exhausted and I come away from that meeting, as much as I hate Zoom, feeling refreshed in some way, because the young people have just shared something of the joy in their lives with me. So I'd really encourage that. If you'd like to be part of a Connect group, drop me an email, and if I get 6 people saying they want to be part of a Connect group, I'll put you together. If I get more than 6, I'll try and work out some groups and start putting you together, because it'd be great to have some Connect groups that are part of our church life that is just encouraging one another, really, and 6 is a good number.
Mm-hmm. Should we move on to number 4?
Let's do that.
So number 4 is 6 ways to be salt and light.
I'm glad you got this one.
Which is kind of the Christian speak, if you like, for saying find 6 ways to help those most in need, to support the vulnerable, to help out in your community in whatever way you can. So I remember at the beginning of the first lockdown, there was a group called Helping Hands Bramall that was set up, which I think is still going.
It is set, very much
so that would be a perfect example of that, to maybe get involved in that. And they do things like get shopping for people who are isolating or who have got symptoms and so can't go out, collecting prescriptions, things like that, and also kind of just thinking more widely actually about food banks and homeless shelters. Over in Stockport we're going to be offering bags of basic groceries for anybody who would need them, no questions asked, they can just come and pick those up. And we're also thinking longer term about how we're going to support some of the most vulnerable over Christmas as well. So just 6 ways in which you can help those most in need and perhaps those who are most vulnerable in our communities, as we're called to do as Christians.
And actually that might feel really intimidating, but it's really simple, just showing acts of kindness to people. It could be that one of your 6 things is when you go out for a walk, you make that walk a litter pick, so you pick up any rubbish you see on that walk, and therefore you're helping creation, and that's a mark of mission. It doesn't have to be, hello, I'm Calum, I'm a Christian, I want to help you, and will you let me tell you about Jesus? I want to watch the show where a vicar did that, and all I could do was cringe. He helped a person and said, well, can I pray with you now? You don't have to do that. You can just help people because you love them.
Yeah, definitely.
So have I got number 5?
Yeah, and I guess in some respects it is kind of linked to number 4.
Yeah, so number 5, the Bishop of Oxford is encouraging those in his diocese to give 6% of their income to their church. Now, we appreciate that's a lot of money for some people, and we are going to shift it and change it ever so slightly, I think. If you want to give 6% to your church, please do. Please bless your minister and your treasurer and your church by doing that. We're not going to say please don't give 6%, but actually we also appreciate that this is a period of time for a lot of people where their jobs are uncertain, where their finances are stretched more than ever before, and actually 6% might be impossible. So we want to encourage you to at least think about charities. Christmas is a time where a lot of charities do a lot of fundraising, and they're not sure whether they're going to be doing that. It's also a time where local businesses are going to be hit quite a lot. So I want to encourage you throughout this lockdown, thinking 6 months, to support 6 charities. Now it could be 1 charity every month, or it could be 6 charities, you're going to give them £6 a month or whatever. But are there 6 charities or local businesses you can support, particularly over the next 6 months, bearing in mind we're already 1 month down, so it's a 5 months. So and at Bramall we're going to be launching our Christmas appeal in the next couple of weeks. This is something new where we're just going to encourage, we're going to kind of bring some of our fundraising efforts for other charities together under one banner, and I'm quite excited to share that with the folk of Bramall, how we're going to support other charities in our Christian ministry at Christmas. So that might be something else you can get involved in. But 6 local businesses or charities that you might be able to support over the next 6 months with whatever you have. And it's really important to state here that God calls us to be wise stewards of what he's given us. So I just want to really highlight that. Actually, if you don't have the money to give, don't give it. We don't want anyone feeling guilty or bad because they're not giving and putting themselves in dangerous positions financially because they feel compelled to give. You should only give if you can, and when you know you can, give what you think is generous, but don't put yourself in danger by giving. Normally, I guess you get clergy saying, please give us all your money. I don't want you falling in really hard times because you've heard me say that. So please be wise, please be joyful, please be generous. Yeah, and think of 6 charities or local businesses you can support in that.
Yeah, and I guess just off the back of that, of both of those really, actually, if you find yourselves in a position of need, don't hesitate to let us know, and we'll do our utmost best to help you out.
We've got various people we can contact and various discretionary funds we can try and squeeze money out of if people are in need, and we are more than willing to try and help folk where we need to.
Definitely. And so the final rule of 6, if you like, that we want to offer to you this morning is 6 people to pray for. And the Bishop of Oxford encouraged people in his diocese to pray specifically for 6 people who don't yet know the love of Jesus, who don't yet have a faith. And so you might want to do that, or you might want to open it up more widely to just pray for 6 different people. And that 6 different people might change every week, every month, or you might pray for the 6 same people across the 6 months.
That's fairly simple. During the period of time between Ascension and Pentecost, in the Church of England and ecumenically, we've developed this kind of initiative called Thy Kingdom Come, where we pray for people to know the love of Jesus. And I certainly encourage people at Bramwell to write down 5 names of people that aren't yet Christian, that don't know God's love, and to pray for them every day, that they might know something of the power of God's Holy Spirit in their lives, and something of the wonderful news of God's amazing grace. I've still got those 5 names that I was praying for back then, and I've been praying for them since. They sit in the back of my Common Worship prayer book, my daily prayer book, and every time I get to read the Lord's Prayer, those names are there. So write your 6 names down and just put it somewhere that you're going to fall over it every day, and just lift those names up to God. You don't have to get complicated about it. It can just simply be, Lord, I pray for these 6 people, list their names, and then just say, Lord, would you bless them today? It's as simple as that. So those are kind of 6 rules that we want to encourage you maybe to take up to help you cope with the next 4 weeks and beyond, as we deal with restrictions once more. So quick run through. Let's expand our horizons. Think 6 months, 5 now, because this was obviously launched in October, looking to Easter in April. 6 days to work, 1 day off a week. Do something different 1 day a week that just reminds you of Sabbath, of rest. Find 6 people to journey with, share life with, be accountable to. 6 ways to be salt and light. How can you help your community, your neighbours, your family, your friends? Find 6 ways to do that. Support 6 local businesses or charities. And find 6 people you can pray for, that they may know God's love and blessing.
Yeah, we'll be doing that, and we hope you'll join us in doing it too. We hope you found that as helpful as we did. We'll probably share the posters that the Diocese of Oxford created across our social media pages, so that you can see what they're about, and maybe have them for yourself at home as well. Yeah,
so I know someone asked us to talk about faith. So we might try and talk about faith next week, unless something else jumps up. So for the person that said, could you talk about faith, we will get around to that. But we got quite excited when we saw this and thought this would be really good to share on the day that England went back into lockdown. So whatever you're doing, obviously stay safe, look after yourself, and God bless.
See you soon.